Hi friends, welcome to another episode of Healing Space. I am your host, Cara, and today's episode is going to be on grief. But before we can get into that, I need to take a moment to thank our sponsor, UCB. Thank you, UCB, for believing in this work and making it possible for us to bring these resources to our listeners. A lot of us grew up thinking grief is something you feel only when someone you love, like a friend, a family member, a pet, passes away. But grief is so much bigger than that. Today, we're going to talk about grief and how you can experience it after a diagnosis, especially when it challenges the future you imagined for yourself. Grief is the emotional experience of coping with loss. Most people picture grief as the painful period after the death of someone we love. But grief can come up anytime something disrupts our sense of normal, our identity, or the world we thought we were building. You may grieve the loss of a friend, a family member, a partner, or a pet, a marriage, a friendship, or a bond, your home or community, your job or career, financial stability, a dream or a goal, and your health. Normally, I'd give you a bunch of statistics about HS and grief, but here's the truth on this one. There isn't a lot of research that looks specifically into grief in hidradenitis suppurativa patients. Instead, we're going to lean on one of the most well-known frameworks for understanding grief, the work of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. I am forever going to say people's names wrong, and I'm really sorry. Miss Elizabeth, in 1969, she published a book on death and dying, a book based on interviews with more than 200 people with terminal illnesses. Even though her work focused on people who were dying, her observations have become a powerful way to understand how humans confront loss, including the loss that comes with chronic illness. She outlined 5 emotional stages that many people experience as they come to terms with a major loss in their life. The 5 stages of grief can look something like this: denial, struggling to accept that the loss is real; anger, frustration, resentment, or rage at yourself or others or the system or even the universe; bargaining, trying to negotiate mentally, if I do everything right, maybe this loss won't happen; depression, sadness, overwhelm, exhaustion, and emotional detachment; acceptance, understanding reality even if it still hurts. Now, I want you to keep in mind these stages aren't rules and they're not a checklist, and they don't always happen in order like that. They don't always, and some don't even appear at all. This isn't a checklist that you go through. You can bounce around between different ones. You may experience some of them or even none of them. They're simply a way to understand how your body and mind adapt to loss. How grief might look with HS specifically now, because that's why we're here. Let's walk through a scenario and see what we can resonate with when it comes to grief and HS. If you bear with me, let's go through a little scenario. Angela. She is a bubbly 22-year-old finishing her degree. She plays on her university's basketball team. She has big plans, not just for graduation, but for her future as an athlete and a teacher. She starts noticing painful abscesses under her arms and in her groin. They're becoming more frequent. They leave these strange scars, and when they heal, if they even heal, they still feel painful and itchy afterwards. She thinks it might be her hygiene. Maybe it's her deodorant. Maybe she needs to try a different soap. She tries everything, and nothing helps. Embarrassed and unsure, she finally sees a doctor and ends up at a dermatologist. And at that appointment, she hears the word she's never heard before: hidradenitis suppurativa. She asks what can be done. The dermatologist explains that it's a disease. She asks if there's a cure, and the dermatologist replies with no. The dermatologist reassures her that it's not contagious. There are treatments, there's antibiotics, biological medications, and sometimes even surgery, and they will do their best to help manage it. But Angela walks out of this appointment stunned. She came in expecting a cream or some simple, easy fix. Instead, she leaves with the knowledge that she now has a lifelong progressive disease. At first, she just internally denies this diagnosis altogether. They must be wrong. This will surely go away. I'll do everything right. She tries to bargain. She eventually tries medication, but nothing seems to be helping. At this point in her journey, she can't get surgery. She needs to finish her basketball season to keep her scholarship. Basketball, the one thing she loves most, becomes incredibly painful to play. She pulls back from her teammates. She doesn't know how to explain what's going on. She bargains with herself. Maybe if she does everything right, maybe it will stop. Maybe I'll get my old body back. But instead, her fatigue gets worse. Her joints ache and her dreams of going pro feel entirely out of reach now. She starts to grieve the future she imagined for herself. Angela does eventually graduate, and she does become a teacher. And at her new school, she decides to volunteer as a basketball coach. Slowly, she falls in love with the game again, just a little differently this time. She did eventually find a treatment plan, found people who support her. She finds a version of her that still honors who she is, even if it looks a little different than she expected. This is grief. It's not linear, it's not clean, it's not a story of defeat. It's often a story of change. I think we all might be able to relate to Angela a little bit. It might not be basketball. Me personally, I've never played a game of basketball in my entire life, but I can think back to how I used to run. I used to go to the gym and do these crazy, intense workouts, and I loved it. I was one of those crazy gym people, and my HS eventually started to flare up from these type of workouts, and I had to completely change what I was doing. And I had to grieve the body that I had that was able to do these high intensity sports and activities. I also want to touch base on not all grief looks the same. There are a few forms of grief that you can experience and can show up after something like a health diagnosis. There is a type of grief called anticipatory grief. I feel like this one's very common in the HS community. It's when you start grieving something before it even happens. I myself experienced this when I know I have a surgery date coming up. For example, a surgery is coming up, or a flare is starting, or a medication you feel like might not be working as well as it did in the past. So your mind starts to prepare you for the pain before it even happens. Or you start grieving the loss of the things you wanted to maybe do that summer that you know you'll have to miss out on because you have an upcoming surgery. It's the process of mourning the loss of something before the loss even takes place. Another one that I've seen is delayed grief. Delayed grief is more of when you push emotions aside until something sometimes breaks later and then it comes back up. And sometimes the logistics of appointments, work, and parenting just block your ability to process the grief in that moment. Your body can grieve later when it finally has the time and space. This could look like you get your HS diagnosis, you move through it, you start treatment plans, you're coming out on the other side, and you're actually doing quite well. And then you're surprised because all of a sudden you feel one of the different stages of grief, and you're like, I don't understand why I'm feeling like that. I'm on the other side now. It might be because you pushed through that initially, which you shouldn't beat yourself up for. You got through it, be proud of yourself, but then it might be time to start sitting in the grief of the life or the health that you thought you were going to have. Because there is symptoms of grief, whether you start experiencing these symptoms right when you get a diagnosis, or maybe you haven't even got your diagnosis yet, you're starting to grieve the health that you had before symptoms started, even though you haven't had the diagnosis yet. Either way, there are symptoms, physical symptoms and mental symptoms of grief. Emotionally, it can feel like it can come in waves. You could feel fine one moment and be absolutely sobbing over something the next. It can come in waves of anger, sadness, hope, numbness, detachment, and even joy. Some moments you might feel sadness that you have HS, and then in another moment you might feel relief that you finally have a diagnosis. Those two feelings can exist at the same time as well. Grief can be a stressor on your body, especially when you have a chronic illness. A few ways you could experience grief physically is things like fatigue, headaches, nausea, upset stomach, tightness in your chest, trouble sleeping, anxiety, depression. I think you kind of get it. Now, I know this all sounds really heavy and you might be going, how long does this grief gonna last? How long am I gonna be stuck feeling these big and oftentimes unpleasant emotions. The American Psychological Association estimates anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. But timelines aren't rules, and they are not a measurement of your strength or resilience. Every person's grief is unique. Now let's get into how do we cope, because I feel like we just went over a lot of things that might be having us feeling a little stressed out, anxious over experiencing grief about losing the health that we thought we might have going into our futures. There are many things we can do to cope with this. Let's get into it. Please stick with me, as this is always my favorite part of the podcast. There's lots of hope coming. The first thing I want you to keep in mind is grief takes time and compassion. Practicing self-care is going to be one of the most important things, like sleeping, eating, and moving your body, and doing things that bring you joy can really help with moving through grief. I know that's so much easier said than done, because maybe when you're feeling angry or sad, the idea of going and getting in a warm bath or making yourself a tea and reading your favorite book might not sound joyful, and it might be really hard to get yourself to do those things. But if you can think of something that might bring you a little bit of joy in a moment, get the strength to get up and do it, you might find it helps. Another thing that can be helpful is keeping a routine. Grief disrupts your sense of normal. That's one of the big key points of grief. If you remember from the beginning, grief is when your sense of normal is disrupted. Routines give your nervous system anchors. If it's simple as trying to wake up at the same time, eat around the same time each day, going to bed at the same time, the smallest little rituals can make a huge difference. Another thing that can help with grief is going outside. I know I say it all the time, but going out in nature can really help your nervous system. If you went outside for a very short walk, or even just go outside and just stand outside around the same time each day, that can be something that can help you cope with grief. Number 3, this is not typically people's favorite one, but I'm going to tell it to you anyways, and that is feel your emotions. Don't bury them. Don't hide them. Feel them. They're not something to be ashamed of, and you don't have to run away from them. You can cry, you can journal, you can write letters to your old life, the future life that you hope for, tell stories. Grief needs to move through you, not around you. And it's okay if you sit in it for a little bit and process your diagnosis and process what life looks like for you moving forward. And you probably know this one's coming next. It's reach out to others. Don't isolate yourself. Look for relationships that love and support you, and let people show up for you. You don't have to do this alone. And then to end this, I'm going to end it on a personal note from myself. It can be shocking to learn you have a chronic, incurable illness. It's okay to grieve the body you had, and it's okay to grieve the future you thought you had ahead of you. Personally, I became deeply depressed after my diagnosis with HS. I believed it would ruin my entire life and my dreams and everything I had ever hoped for. And then slowly, over years, I learned I was wrong. HS is not capable of taking everything from you. Yes, sometimes things become harder, but many things also remain the same. Some things even become more beautiful. And sometimes your dreams do have to evolve and change in ways you never would have imagined. And if you're still in the messy middle with denial, anger, sadness, rejection, I want you to hear this. Things can get better. Life with HS is not always easy, but it is still beautiful, just like you. Thank you for listening to today's episode, and thank you again to our sponsor, UCB, for showing us support. There is a worksheet that accompanies this episode over on hsconnect.org. Until next time, please be gentle with yourself. With lots of love, Cara.